Andrea Stella has just unleashed the most explosive criticism of the season after the FIA disqualified both McLarens in Las Vegas for microscopic floor wear that shocked the entire paddock. New evidence reveals that the skid blocks on Norris and Piastri's cars were thinner than a strand of hair, and the FIA used measurements precise to 1/1000th of a millimeter to throw both drivers out of the race. This decision did not only erase their points, it ripped apart the championship standings and triggered a furious response from Stella that is already shaking the sport. And before we break down the full story, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next chapter of this battle between McLaren and the FIA that could reshape the final races of the season. The Las Vegas Grand Prix shifted from celebration to crisis when the FIA released its late-night report confirming that both McLaren cars had failed post-race inspection. According to the document, the problem was not pace, strategy, or driving errors, but a technical violation discovered underneath the floor. The skid block, a regulated component designed to prevent teams from running their cars too low, showed wear levels that fell below the mandatory 9mm minimum. Because the Las Vegas circuit produced aggressive compressions and unpredictable bumps, the FIA expected some wear, but the measurements gathered from both McLaren chassis went beyond what the rulebook allows. As the stewards repeated the measurements, the results became impossible to contest. Piastri's car showed values of 8.96, 8.74 and 8.90 across different reference zones. Norris's car produced similarly concerning figures of 8.88 and 8.93. These readings meant that both cars had run lower than permitted for at least a portion of the race. The FIA used equipment capable of measuring to 1/1000th of a millimeter, which removed any potential margin of error. The values did not sit near the borderline. They sat beneath it, and the rule is absolute. The shock inside the McLaren garage grew rapidly because the team had expected a routine post-race inspection. Both drivers had delivered strong results, with Norris finishing second and Piastri fourth, showing competitive pace across the night. But the technical readings revealed a hidden issue that had undermined those performances. Once the FIA recorded values below 9mm, the protocol required an automatic disqualification. That meant both drivers were removed from the results no matter how well they had raced. This created a moment of disbelief as engineers realized that a detail smaller than a grain of sand had erased an entire weekend of execution. The impact extended far beyond the McLaren garage. Every team up and down the paddock watched the situation unfold with a mix of shock and curiosity. Floor wear regulations are among the strictest in Formula One because they protect the aerodynamic integrity of the championship. When cars run too low, they gain performance in cornering and straight-line stability. Even a small reduction in plank thickness can generate meaningful aerodynamic load, which is why the FIA enforces the rule with unwavering rigidity. By disqualifying both McLarens, the FIA demonstrated that even microscopic violations carry the heaviest penalty available. Andrea Stella entered the FIA hearing intending to argue for context rather than forgiveness. He highlighted unusual porpoising during the event, reduced practice due to damaged drain covers, and potential early contact for Piastri that may have contributed to the plank wear. These points were acknowledged by the stewards, but the regulation leaves no room for interpretation. The FIA confirmed that the cause of the wear is irrelevant. Only the measurement matters. Stella listened as the findings were read out while knowing that the values had repeated identically across every inspection cycle. His frustration grew because the team had no legal route to challenge the ruling. The consequences of the disqualification created immediate aftershocks in the championship standings. Norris should have strengthened his lead with a podium finish, but instead he walked away with nothing. Piastri should have pulled closer to the top, but instead he fell back into equal territory with Verstappen. The FIA decision did not simply adjust a few points. It rewrote the competitive landscape heading into the final races of the season. And as the tension settled over Las Vegas, Stella prepared to deliver the strongest public criticism of the FIA he had made since becoming team principal, knowing that the ruling had changed everything for McLaren. The foundation of the controversy began when the FIA delivered the precise measurements that proved both McLaren cars had breached the minimum skid block thickness. The document outlines that the plank on each chassis must remain at or above 9mm. This thickness is not symbolic. It controls how low a team can run their car and therefore how much aerodynamic load they can generate. When the FIA placed the gauges on Piastri's car, the readings came back at 8.96, 8.74 and 8.90 in separate reference areas. These numbers confirmed that the floor had worn more than the regulation allows and that the performance of the car may have been affected by a ride height lower than intended by the rules. When the stewards turned to inspect Norris's car, the situation became even more concerning for McLaren. Norris produced measurements of 8.88 and 8.93. The FIA repeated each reading and confirmed that all values remained below the legal limit. According to the report, the accuracy of the tool used for the measurements is 1/1000th of a millimeter, which means the results cannot be dismissed as instrument noise or human error. Once these numbers were recorded, the outcome was predetermined. The FIA has always applied disqualification without hesitation in plank war cases, and there is no procedural room for interpreting the values differently. The severity of the ruling is amplified by the sporting implications it delivered. Norris had crossed the line in second place, a result that would have strengthened his championship lead to a huge advantage with only 2 races remaining. Piastri had finished fourth, maintaining a competitive position in the title fight. The FIA findings overturned both results and erased every point McLaren gained during the evening. This dramatic swing in standings was not the product of racecraft, strategy, or misjudgment, but a mechanical detail hidden underneath the car. The report highlights how both drivers went from celebrating a successful night to seeing their standings collapse within a single inspection cycle. McLaren's internal review offered several potential explanations for the excessive wear. Stella pointed to unexpected porpoising during the event, a result of the long straights and uneven surface in Las Vegas, which may have caused the floor to strike harder than simulations predicted. He also noted that disrupted practice sessions due to weather and circuit repair limited the team's opportunity to validate ride height settings. Finally, Piastri had suffered early contact that may have contributed to additional plank damage. All these factors appeared reasonable, yet none of them altered the core truth that the FIA had uncovered. Cause is irrelevant. Compliance is absolute. The FIA document states clearly that intention does not influence whether a car is legal. A plank measurement either meets the minimum threshold or it does not. There is no clause for accidental damage or unpredictable circuit conditions. This rigidity is what left Stella so frustrated. He understood that the stewards could acknowledge the circumstances but were powerless to change the punishment. The rules governing floor wear are among the most unforgiving in Formula One because any flexibility would allow teams to exploit ride height for performance gains. Once the values showed sub-9 mm thickness, the stewards had no discretion. McLaren simply had to accept the ruling. The aftermath of the disqualification became even more dramatic because of its effect on the championship battle. According to the document, Norris should have left Las Vegas with more than 400 points and a commanding advantage that would have allowed him to manage the final races with confidence. Instead, he dropped to 390 points while Piastri and Verstappen moved into an equal position behind him. This unexpected redistribution of points turned what looked like a controlled title campaign into an unpredictable three-way fight. The report confirms that this shift occurred not because of racing incidents but because of a technical infraction measured with scientific precision beneath the car. Andrea Stella's strongest argument during the FIA hearing centered around the exceptional conditions of the Las Vegas weekend, conditions he believes should have been considered before applying the ruling. He explained that the circuit had produced severe porpoising through its long and uneven straights, creating heavy vertical load on the floor that McLaren had not predicted. This in turn accelerated plank wear in a way that did not reflect any attempt to gain illegal aerodynamic performance. Stella insisted that the data should be weighed against the environment in which the cars were driven, yet the regulation does not grant the stewards room to adjust the penalty even when the cause arises from unusual track characteristics. A second point raised by Stella focused on the limited practice running McLaren endured due to the disrupted early sessions. The document confirms that the team had less time than usual to establish a reliable baseline for ride height and chassis balance. The combination of weather interruptions and track repairs meant the team could not refine its setup with the precision required for a new circuit as unforgiving as Las Vegas. Stella stressed that these constraints left McLaren operating with incomplete data, which may have contributed directly to the miscalculation in plank wear. However, because the rule does not evaluate intent or circumstance, this argument, while technically reasonable, carried no weight in the final decision. Stella also presented a detailed explanation for Piastri's situation. The report acknowledges that Piastri suffered contact on the opening lap of the race, which may have shifted or compromised the lower structure of the floor. While the team could not prove definitively that the contact was the cause of the excessive wear, Stella argued that the potential influence should have been considered in assessing responsibility. Yet the FIA reminded the McLaren representatives that accidental damage has never been treated as a mitigating factor in plank wear violations. Once a car completes the race in a non-compliant condition, it must be excluded regardless of how the damage occurred. From a procedural perspective, the FIA stood behind the machinery used to gather the measurements. The instrument records thickness down to 1/1000th of a millimeter, and the document notes that multiple measurements were taken with team members present. The consistency of the results created absolute certainty. Stella understood that the technical reliability of the readings left him without a foundation for appeal. The FIA had provided transparent, verifiable data that did not fluctuate across repeated measurements. The reliability of the process is precisely what makes these rulings so difficult to challenge. Once the readings remain fixed, the penalty becomes fixed as well.